there. So we are here with Professor Di Maggio. Would you be able to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Professor Di Maggio. I'm a professor of finance at the Imperial Business School. I was before a professor of finance at Harvard Business School, where I also co-founded the Harvard Lab on Fintech, Web3, and crypto.
Amazing. So crypto, hitting the news again. It's, big again. So sort of like broadly and, I guess deep politically to begin with, what do you think the future of crypto will look like? What time are we in? Is this an inflection point? What can you say about the present moment and where things are?
Okay, so definitely this is an exciting time. I think there are few angles that we can touch upon. So first of all, I think that overall the industry is here to stay. I think now it's clearer than before. Then in terms of why I think that this is interesting, because I think that looking forward to the next couple of years, next 5 years horizon, we are going to see, I think, more and more of an integration between traditional financial markets and the underlying technology of blockchain, more general than just cryptocurrencies. And so we are going to start, we just started seeing that already with BlackRock jumping into the cryptos arena with the ETFs. We have seen that with the discussion of using the blockchain as the underlying technology for instance, central bank digital currencies. We have seen, in some sense, even aspects of the traditional financial markets that have been very conservative, moving in the direction of embracing the underlying technology of crypto. And so I think that's a trend that is also going to accelerate in the next few years for a couple of different reasons. One is that at this moment in time, given also the political situation in the US, I think there is interest towards the different regulatory approach. And that different regulatory approach, which I'm sure that we're going to talk about it, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be the Wild West, but it means some more clarity around what does it mean for a traditional institution to be engaged in the crypto space. I think that will bring in a lot of both institutions as well as mom and pop shops and users that are a little bit on the sidelines, that have seen all of these headlines, all based on 100% returns, so 100 times returns and gains, as well as 100 times losses, and been sort of scared of looking at this as a real new asset class. With, I think, a regulatory intervention that takes care of that type of uncertainty, I think that's what really is going to accelerate and potentially accelerate along a number of different dimensions. Another example of something like that, of where you see sort of an integration between the two, is, for instance, the use of stablecoins. Stablecoins have been around for quite some time. And if you think about the headlines have always been about, oh, but Bitcoin is very volatile. There is no use of cryptocurrency for payments. Well, stablecoins have been around for quite some time. Stablecoins, just to remind our audience, they are tokens that are pegged one-to-one with the dollar or any other currency. The most common ones and most used ones are pegged to dollars. That means that there is no volatility, conceptually, and you can actually use those tokens as a minnow payment. So the issue of volatility has been resolved. Now, the other issue with the adoption of minnow payments like those is that you need to have both sides of this equation participating. You need to have merchants, all type of merchants that adopt that as a potential agreeable minnow payment. And then users that decide that rather than using fiat, they can jump and use stable coins as the main source. Why would any of those two do something like that? Is because it's for any type of cross-border payments, stable coins are significantly better than using a wire transfer or using any other type of traditional minnow payment, because it's significantly less costly, it's much faster, works 24/7, while if you send a wire transfer on Friday afternoon, you're going to need to wait at least Monday to get it back. Here with stable coins, everything is instantaneous. So that's another area where you see that it's a new way of doing something that is very old. We have payment rails, the credit card companies, we have SWIFT, ACH. Now we have another one, which is based on that technology, can be adopted everywhere. And that's just an example of where I see this convergence between the traditional world and the crypto world.
Right. Right. So, okay. And so on that sort of political leaning, we'll have a new chair of the SEC, right? And there will be some changes in this regulatory framework that, you're mentioning here. And, you talk about how volatile the coin is and exactly, how some of these changes may or may not improve or make things worse in the terms of, market movement. What do you see in the future? Do you think, having a more involved government in regulation will help to, normalize the coin, normalize crypto in general, or do you think it'll, make things a little bit more volatile?
Yeah. So I think that in some sense, volatility is a little bit in the DNA of this industry just because it's very
Right.
early on. Just to remind people, if you think about the Visa was created in the 60s, went public in the late 90s, early 2000s. What that meant is that for 40 years, they operated without anybody looking at the stock price. Here, instead, in crypto, we're in a situation where everybody that jumps and creates a new startup has also a price attached to it. And so you look at that price, and obviously at the beginning, there is going to be a lot of volatility. So in some sense, volatility is a little bit inherent in the crypto industry just because you always have a lot of transparency about how things go, which is usually not the case for traditional companies. Okay. So given that, politically, why I think that this is an interesting time, I think it's because let's look at the past. The past has seen an approach which was mostly regulation by enforcement. So you might be an operator in this industry for several years, operating in an area where you thought that you were not breaking any law, and then the regulator shows up and gives you a Wells notice, or it gives you sort of a cease and desist, or even sue you altogether. Okay. That's problematic because that creates a lot of uncertainty, not only for that particular operator, but for everybody else who could potentially be doing something similar, right? I will give you an example. BlockFi was a particularly interesting operator, a particular institution that was giving the possibility to individuals to deposit their crypto holdings and earn some interest. Think about this as a crypto version of a deposit account. Okay? They operated for several years, got backed by several investors, raised millions of dollars. And then at some point, the SEC woke up and said, "Look, this is actually not a product that you can sell to users. You need to register with an S1 and pay us a fine of $100 million." BlockFi paid the fine, $100 million, and then spent the next 9 months trying to file the S1, which is the same requirement that is asked to companies that go through an IPO. They tried, and they failed and went bankrupt. Why? Because the current system does not allow crypto companies to interact with the type of regulation that we have right now. Not because they don't want to, but simply because the regulation that we have now, remember, has been written in 1933. So do you think that those should be the regulations that should be applied today? Also, the big question of whether a cryptocurrency is a security or not a security. That's not a question of, oh, the crypto folks are all people that are trying to scam a lot of those issues. But that's not the reason why people complain, people in the industry complain. The reason why people in the industry complain is that suppose that I do want to want to create a token that is a security. What's the process to have that? First of all, there is no exchange that is allowed to touch exchange like Coinbase or Binance, Kraken, Crypto.com. None of those are allowed to touch securities. So the moment in which a token is deemed as a security, it cannot be traded. It's useless, basically, right? Because if you have a token and it cannot be traded, what does it mean? Second, why those exchanges cannot trade securities? Because to trade securities, you need to have broker-dealers and custodian that do two different type of jobs than what the exchange does. As of today, the exchanges do all these three things together. They allow for buy and selling, the exchange. They allow for keeping your asset hopefully safe. FTX is proof that sometimes that's not the case, but they should keep your assets safe. And then they also allow you as the end users, the end investors, to trade on the platform. And so they work a little bit as a broker dealer. Okay. The regulation in the US says that an exchange cannot operate all these three functions. They should all be separate. Good. What happens if tomorrow an exchange goes to a broker dealer and try to get in a partnership? The broker dealer is explicitly forbidden from touching crypto. So as of today, there is no way, in some sense, that's the bottleneck, right? That, okay, you want this to be a security, but you should have a framework that allows the operator to file a request to be deemed as security, and then a place where this can actually be traded. That's not the case as of today in the US. And that's the issue with regulation by enforcement, that is only forcing you to pay a fine ex post, and you are always under the uncertainty that the chairman of the SEC can wake up a day and say, oh, what I thought was legal until yesterday, today is not anymore.
Right.
And then what do we do? Okay.
Right.
So that's the big issue, and why I think that now a pro-business stance only means let's actually figure it out. What's the right way of
Right.
implementing a set of rules for an industry that did not exist 100 years ago?
Right. So I guess, a counter argument to that would be if you have the government involved, then you're protecting against some of the market manipulation that occurs within the crypto industry. So, do you see having the Trump administration, having the SEC, have some stakes in crypto as preventing some of that? Or do you see that as being outside the purview to begin with, just because of the way the market is shaped?
No, I think that that's definitely in the purview of the regulator. That's exactly what the regulator should do.
Right.
So the regulator, having a pro-business stance should not mean that the end investors are actually put at risk. Actually, having clear rules is safer for everybody. It's safer for those that want to build a new startup using the technology, and it's safer for the end investors that think that this might be a way of investing in a new asset class. So definitely having clear rules in some sense helps both sides. And I think that's the tough balance. That's not an easy thing to do, right? It's easier, I think, to swing in on the opposite. So either go full against the crypto industry, which I think, in my opinion, has been the stance up to now, or swing all the way the other side and saying, okay, we're going to let sort of this industry evolve and see what happens, and then probably rethink about what are the rules that we should be put in place. What makes me hopeful in all of this is that if they are willing to listen to the industry wants the balance.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly because it needs to be, it's becoming more institutionalized. And the BlackRock investors, just to be clear, right? The BlackRock investors are going to be pretty mad if something some missteps happen along the ways and they have not safeguarded the end investors. Much more than the investors that have invested in that small meme coin and they lost money.
Right.
Their voices are going to be significantly more powerful, okay, in the financial system. That's why I'm saying I'm hopeful that that balance could potentially be found. Also, with the help of putting together a crypto advisory council, that happens all the time in traditional finance. You have industry folks that are commenting the laws all the time. So there is no mystery that that's sort of the way in which it should work, because policymakers are great, but they don't have the deep knowledge of looking at the industry from the inside out. And so I think and what also makes hopeful is that other countries have done a much better job. Yeah, Switzerland, where many of the foundations related, like for example, the Ethereum Foundation is housed, you have a very simple process where you send an application describing what the protocol does, what the token should be doing, and you get an answer within 30 days. And you have a continuous interaction with the regulator about what can be done, cannot be done. This type of discourse doesn't really happen so far in the US, and I think that's the gap that needs to be filled.
Right. So you'd say, Trump coin aside, this is generally a positive movement.
Yes. So I mean, obviously, just to give you a heads up, I wrote a book on the space.
Great.
The only space that I've decided not to touch upon were meme coins. Why? Because as an economist, I thought those are the worst possible example of a casino using crypto. But in some sense, there are these events that are bad for the industry because for many reasons. One is because those are the ones that make the headlines.
Right.
And then you talk even with some of my colleagues, and they have no idea about some of the actual new technologies that are used. And why? Because most of the commentary is on these strange swing things that happens every day. The other thing is that they financially take out liquidity from good projects. Right? So if people have to decide whether to bet $1,000 on the next meme coin or invest in a project could potentially actually bring in cash flows, real cash flow, and be a real project, many unfortunately decided that betting on the lottery is much better. If you regulate that lottery somehow, I think that also it's a plus for the whole industry.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.